Men, where we dig deep into what it truly means to be a man today. I'm Jake Fishbein.
And I'm Nick Papadopoulos, affectionately known as Coach Nick.
Together, we've led men's groups for a combined 26 years.
And we've also written a novel about a fictional men's group and the impact of this work. And today's session, we're going to explore this book that's coming out on June the 9th, 2026, in about 2 months.
Yes, we are. So, in addition to the novel, which we're going to talk about, and the Arena Men's Group, which we've been running since 2020, this podcast is another space where we have super real conversations about vulnerability, courage, and connection. No masks, no pretending, just honest talk about being men.
Awesome. So, Jake, everyone, take a deep breath in. Take it in, take it in. Let it out. There you go. There you go. Step into the arena with us and let's get rocking and a rolling.
Let's do it. So, for those of you who are maybe tuning in for the first time, the way we do this podcast is we prepare a bunch of questions for each other that we don't know about, and we ask them, kind of mimicking the hot seats that we do in our group, the Arena. So, today is all about our book, The Men's Group, A Novel of Messy Friendships, which is going to be available for purchase on June 9th on Amazon, bookshop.org, barnesandnoble.com, ebook, physical copy. We've got an audiobook coming out in the fall. So much exciting stuff about this book, which we've worked on for a decade, which is pretty crazy
A
to
long
think
time.
about a long time where we started and where we are now. So, I wanted to jump off first and I wanted to ask you this question because this idea came from you. So take us back to the beginning. Take me, all of our listeners back to the beginning. Where did the idea for this book come from?
Yeah. Well, 10 years is a long time, so hold on. Give me a moment to go through the archives. I appreciate the question because obviously the origin story is important. Uh, you know, originally the book was originally going to be more of a research-based book, more like the Outliers. I think that's the name of the book, right? Where there's research about firstborns and middle children and lastborns and I thought it would be really interesting to take a look at from a research scientific perspective, men between the ages of, right? Or, men who had a single parent or had two parents. Uh, so that was the original idea. Um, Clearly it changed, right? Because we've written a fictional novel. Um, I would say the reason and the reason why I wanted to do a book like that is because there wasn't 10 years ago when we started writing our novel. And I guess you could even say a little bit even further than that, right? There hasn't really been a whole lot of books about men. And dare I say that men in some way are underrepresented around men's mental health, for example, right? Um, Men's personal development, men's transformation, if you will, right? So when this book started, I really felt compelled to tell the story of men, right? So that we could better understand ourselves, understand how we got to where we got to, understand what's available, what new possibilities there may be. I read a book by Terrence Real, many years ago. I believe the title is "I Don't Want to Talk About It," and it had a real profound impact on my life. And that's really where, again, the original idea of the book of, let's call it, doing more of a research science-based type approach, that's where it really came from, because I was so um impacted. It really made a difference in my life. It definitely helped to start that very first men's group 20 plus years ago. So that's really where the original idea was born from. what inspired, wanting to write something. And and as I started doing, going through that process of, hey, let's do a research book, and I was talking with other folks, it just didn't click for me. It didn't inspire me in the way that our book has over the last 10 years. And so, I pivoted. My partner, Anissa, who knew the both of us at the time in, different capacities. Obviously, she was in a leadership program with you. We were dating, and she said, and she was experiencing my frustration with, how I was approaching the original concept. And she said, "Hey, why don't you and Jake, meet and talk? And Jake's a, great writer, and he's awesome. And then you and I were also starting to work together in this very, coincidental way, and here we are." So
Yes, here we are a decade later.
a decade later, right, right. Look what you got yourself into.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this question. I mean, two-part, right? One is, so our novel that's coming out June 9th is called The Men's Group, a novel of messy friendships. So what is the men's group, right? Um, and why did you say yes? Like, what was you know, your inspiration was, I mean, I'm sure you wanted to work with me because I'm so amazing and wonderful, of course. Aside from that,
Naturally
naturally, I
that.
mean, our folks know that already. But like, why did you feel like the story needed to exist, and why did you think you needed to be the dude, the man to make it happen?
This is such a good question. And when we started working on this, I had no idea what a men's group was. I remember hearing about the one you led, and people described it as like a band of blood brothers. And I was like, that sounds really weird. Like, I don't know if I want anything to do with that. But I remember at that time it was early 2016, and we had worked together for a few months previously and then stopped working together when you went back into sales. And I remember I'd go to your podcast every once in a while, The Dudes of Disruption, which ran for many years, that you ran with two other gentlemen.
Hmm.
And it was the inception of the men's group, The Dudes of Disruption. It was this conversation about men and masculinity. And I was in a transitional point in my life where I
Right.
was trying to figure out what to do with my career. I was very not unbalanced, but like I was not on firm footing in any
Hmm.
area. And I remember getting the text from you that you said, "Hey, I have an idea I want to run by you. Do you want to grab lunch?" And of course, in my
Hmm.
mind, it was like, "Oh, maybe Nick wants to offer me a job because I'm so
Hmm.
desperate for a job." And when we sat down and you started talking through this idea and you mentioned wanting to write a book, I got shivers up and down my spine, which was like,
Mm.
yes, there is alignment here. And it was far less about I'm super passionate about men's groups or men and masculinity, and much more, I really appreciated you and what you had brought
Hmm.
into my life and our budding friendship. And something felt right about it.
Yep.
That's why I said yes. And I've always written kind of in between fiction and memoir. So for me, it was natural to say, let's write it as a novel. I've always
Hmm.
believed, at least for myself, and I know for a lot of people, that fiction is a path for such deep learning because you're not hit over the head with what you're supposed to learn. And it
Right.
creates this broad, different pathways for the reader to have
Right.
their own insights. And I've always had my biggest individual breakthroughs from reading from fiction. And
Right.
so for me, it was a no-brainer. Let's write this as fiction. And of
Yeah.
course, over the last decade, I've thought, had we written an Outliers type book, we would have been done 7 years ago. And it would have been a very different process. But I probably wouldn't have learned as much about myself as I
Yeah.
did writing something like that as
Right.
I did with this book. And of course, after saying yes, I joined the Dudes of Disruption, and we started meeting every week to talk about the book and
Right.
men. And very clearly, it emerged that, oh, there's like a really potent, powerful story here for me
Mm.
too. And the book became a way of exploring my own relationships
Hmm.
and learning what it means to be in a men's group, what it means to coach men, what it means to be in this process of discovery and journeying.
Hmm.
Because one of the biggest things I learned in the book, and something that we talk about in our group a lot, is this idea of the Ithaca poem, which is an epigraph in the book,
Right.
which is you hope the journey is a long one. And you could very well say we had a long journey with this book, 10 years, the same number of years it took Odysseus to get
I,
home from
I was gonna
Troy.
say, I was
So,
gonna say, did you do that on purpose? Because that's your favorite book?
well, there are no accidents. So there's no accident there, and there's such value in that process and in not stopping at version one, but
Right.
at keep going until it feels like, okay, this is the story that's meant to be told, not
Right.
necessarily the one that I thought needed to be told, but the one that was birthed and uncovered throughout the
Yep.
journey.
Let me ask you this question as a follow-up. You alluded to it. What did writing this book or being on this Ithaca journey, right? What did it force you to confront within yourself, or what did it reveal? Um, you know, uh, Maybe it's multiple things, right? But
I mean, yeah.
if there's one that stands out to you.
I mean, there are several that stand out to me, and we could talk for, I think, hours about this topic,
Hmm.
that each draft forced me to confront something different.
Hmm.
And when I think about the first draft, which we wrote in 2016, 2017, that was a lot of me confronting challenges in some of my relationships,
Yep.
challenges in my relationships with my dad, challenges in the relationship with one of my best friends, and challenges in my relationships with women. And I
Hmm.
think those three things really came in and were the heart of that first draft.
Yep.
And then over the years, that changed because I worked through those challenges in large part
Yep.
by writing the book.
Yep. Wait,
And
it wasn't my coaching?
that helped too. But I do say that the single most transformative thing I've done is write the book
Yeah,
because I
absolutely.
think that created the reflective pathway to confront what I was learning in the men's group or in my life in a different way. I think one of the most challenging things to confront, and this is how I'll wrap this question,
Mhm.
is one of our characters deals with a very dark secret in his
Right.
past.
Right.
And writing those chapters required me to go to very dark places within
Hmm.
myself. And I
Hmm.
remember finishing them and just sitting with this gross feeling of knowing that that's part of me too.
Yeah.
That the darkness that he experienced is part of my experience because
Mm.
I had to go to that part in myself in order to create his
Yeah.
story.
Yep.
And that was radically uncomfortable
Yeah.
because it meant sitting with, someone who I didn't believe that I was or someone I was scared to be.
Right.
And that was really challenging and also so valuable because we all have those dark places.
Right.
And a book is such a tremendous way to give life to all of the darkness or all of the light in so many different ways without confronting it as a in myself, but also confronting it in myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So the
Can I
men,
also
yeah,
can
yeah,
sorry,
go for it.
this is for our listeners. You know, what I also just want to say is that when we talk about this poem Ithaca, which ultimately emphasizes the importance of being present on the journey, inside the journey, that the journey is everything, right? It really is the golden nuggets. Yes, the destination to get home, if you will, is clearly important. However, if you get home and you've missed the entire trip, right, because of you're disconnected, you're anxious, you have expectations, et cetera, right? You're going to miss all of the golden nuggets. I say all that as it relates to you because, as you said, when we had the conversation over burgers, right, 10 plus years ago, you said yes. part of the process was for you to join the dudes men's group as research. What you didn't expect is that 10 years later, not only would you have an awesome, and it really is an awesome novel, folks. I know I'm biased, and I'm still gonna tell you, yep, he's showing it up on the screen there. What you didn't expect is that you ended up becoming a certified coach. You became a facilitator. You became a teacher. You became a leader of men. You and I have, co-founded, the Arena Men's Group platform, and we have multiple groups. That wasn't part of the equation when you joined the dudes. And I just want to say that I think that's such a big deal, because um, it's really, really important when you're on the journey, any journey, to be open to noticing the gifts and experiencing the gifts and noticing, what's coming up for you. Like you said, hey, I sat there, writing this one character. So I just wanted to acknowledge you for that, but and also just call that out.
I really appreciate that. And to share a little bit more, I guess, for our listeners, before I hand you the next question, in so much of our work, we talk about the idea of being, excuse me, directional versus
Mm,
destinational.
mm,
And as I'm listening to that reflection on my journey, that, I hired you almost 11 years ago to help me find the next step of my career. And it worked. It didn't happen in 3 months like I wanted it to, but it worked. And in large part because it was choosing to set off in a direction.
mm.
And I think that's what we did when we started writing the book and I joined the dudes was we set off in this direction that we knew what the first step was, but we certainly didn't know what the
Right,
second, third, fourth, fifth, and last steps
right,
were.
right.
And when you set off in a direction, it leaves you open to the side quests along the way. It
Yep,
leaves you open to seeing the island in the distance and changing course because
right,
you're not so rigidly focused on reaching the destination, on
right,
reaching the goal. And a lot of
right,
the times, what I see in men who are really struggling or humans, I mean, it happens to women too, is they get so fixated on the destination that
right,
they miss the golden nuggets and the beauty along the journey. They want to
right.
make their road a short one, not a long
Yes.
one.
Yep, yep,
So, with that, the next question I have for you is kind of diving in some of the themes of the book. And friendship amongst men, male friendship, is really at the center of this story that we
yep.
tell. What does our novel say about male friendship that most men aren't saying out loud?
That it is super duper 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 ridiculously important. That the book as it unfolds really reveals the importance of being in deep, meaningful relationships where you can be honest, you can, let your hair down, if you will, right? Um, it really reveals, it really disrupts, I should say, this idea that, men do better when they do things alone, or that men are stronger when they do things alone. Um, and that continues to come up in our groups when a man's back is against the wall, right? When they're feeling pressure financially, they're feeling pressure in their career, they're feeling pressure with dealing with their kids. Um, the go-to often is I have to do this alone. And or and when I say do it alone, what I really mean is I have to keep it all in my head. I really can't seek out support. I can't really share that I'm having doubts or that I'm struggling or, I'm not exactly sure how to do this, right? Um, so you know, the book, um, the book starts out again without giving too much away. The book starts out with, two of the main characters. or at least one of the two main characters, wanting to create a deeper connection with one of their friends. And the group becomes a place or a pathway to help make that happen. And as that unfolds, there's other characters in the group, and the reader, right, will start to really understand the importance of what a friendship really provides to a man. Um, you know, there's lots of research out there that shows that men, especially as we get older, have less and less friends. We have less and less relationships that you would relate to as being a quality relationship, a relationship that you can really count on, someone that you could connect with, share whatever is needed to be shared. And so um, I you know to your point, talking about how the book over the 10 years unfolded. The book originally was not meant to be about men and friendship, right? I mean, I don't. We didn't when we had burgers that day, or even as you said, as we were meeting, those first couple of years, even we weren't focused on, hey, let's just make sure we get that theme of men and friendship. It just, to your point, actually, I think it naturally became important. It naturally came out in the characters because we realized how much these men actually needed friendship. That's the gap, and that's the gap I would say for many of the men that we have in our groups. And when I say friendship, friendship can mean a lot of different things. Um, but meaning you could hang out all the time, you could, go and do things together. What I really mean here is the opportunity to be gotten, to be seen, to be heard, to also to do that for somebody else as well. Where friendship to me, especially in the novel, it's men actually just listening to each other, not fixing anything. Um, really empathizing even when there's disagreement, if you will,
Mhm.
right? Disagreement in whatever it is, how you might approach something, or even your politics for that matter, or your lifestyle. Um, to me, the friendship in the book is about the empathy, the understanding, getting in each other's worlds. Um, I'll just say one last thing about friendship that I believe is really important. Friendship is a big deal because it requires doing something extra. When you have family, for example, right? You have siblings, parents, cousins, aunties, and uncles, right? And family, like family friends you grew up with since you were 5 years old, all that. Like, often with family, there are institutional moments and events that bring you together, right? Like you're getting married, right? You're going to bring family together, right? People have babies and they'll have a celebration. People come together, right? Um, Funerals, right? People, families come together, right? Certain families have certain traditions, Thanksgiving, or certain holidays. All good, by the way. With friendship, there isn't an institutional event like what I just described. You have to go out of your way. Like for example, last week you said you reached out and you said, "Hey Nick, are you in the city? Why don't you come over to my office so we can actually, because we still meet every week. Can we meet in person?" That's what I mean. That's friendship. That it requires people to do that.
Mhm.
And the book, the characters in the book get that as the book goes on.
Yes. I have one follow-up question before we move on. What have you learned about friendship over the last 10 years as we've written this book that became about men and friendship?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because during the 10 years, I've also had, um, I've been parallel to writing the book and its different iterations, right? I've been dealing with cancer. Dealing with cancer 5 years ago, and going through that process of treatment and healing, and then 4 years of being in remission, and now dealing with stuff around my cancer again, right? I bring that up because I think the combination of the book, the development of the characters, our growth, right, as our own growth as humans, my health journey, I really have come to realize that um, it's been the biggest disruption of my life. I defined success prior to all of this as uh, my title, the amount of money I was making, how many podcasts I could be on, or how many speaking engagements I could be on, how many people have me in their Rolodex. Um, um, and I've come to realize that, my wealth, my well-being is absolutely based on my friendships, on my relationships. And what I realized is that when we started on this journey, I realized I don't know if I have really close friends. I think I'm part of that statistic, some of that research that says, I don't know, half the men out there don't have a quality, deep quality relationship with another man, right? So I would say that it had me, the combination of the book and my health journey, which again, like you said earlier, there's no coincidences. Um, I really believe it's been a major disruption for me. So yeah, friendship is number one, and I'm so happy that the book has, you know, moved in that direction, like it has.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautifully said.
So, so the book is called The Men's Group, a novel of messy friendships. Uh, how would you how do you think the book tackles or responds to what does it mean to be a man today, modern masculinity, right? And where do you think men are still getting stuck? So sort of two-part,
Mm.
right? So how does the book touch on modern masculinity, right? What does it mean to be a man, which is one of our core values in our groups, right? Which is redefining what it means to be a man. And where do you think we still get stuck,
Yeah,
including the characters? I mean,
absolutely. So when we set out to write the book 10 years ago, we set out to do two things, which was show people the power of men's groups and explore what it means to be a man today.
mhm,
So that initial draft, the initial versions, that question of what does it mean to be a man today was really embedded in all of it. I think we were trying to portray men being different in the world.
right, right.
And it's really interesting. I'm sitting here and it's like this big empty space in my brain for this question because the book is so much about that. It is about
Mm,
showing men being different. And I also believe it's about honoring where men are and the
mm,
complicated nature of it's not one or the other, that redefining masculinity or exploring what it means to be a man today doesn't mean that someone doesn't hold on to unhealthy patterns
mhm.
of traditional or learned masculinity.
Yeah,
And our characters certainly hold that polarity
yeah,
where there are characters who are self-expressed and honest and vulnerable with each other and still hold deep secrets.
yep,
There are friends who want deeper relationships with other men and yet are hiding things.
Right.
There are men who still are very much about the results and just being like goal driven and future focused. And it's interesting because over the last 10 years, there has been this increased conversation about men, about masculinity. Toxic masculinity wasn't so frequently a used phrase until about the last 8 years, even though it goes
Yep.
back, I think, to the 70s or 80s or
Yep.
earlier. And it's like our entire culture has been wrestling with what does it mean to be a man today?
Right.
And I know when we started, and this was part of my own journey for so long, I was trying to show myself or be in the world as like, I'm different than other men.
Hmm.
And it meant I didn't really honor the parts of myself that weren't different than other men.
Hmm.
And early drafts of the book were about that difference. They were very much hitting you over the head with this is
Mm.
how a man should be.
Right.
Men should connect with each other more like women do. It should be more face to face. It should be really open and vulnerable and
Right.
talk about everything. That when you have a negative story, you need to kill it. Like there's no room for disempowering beliefs.
Hmm.
And the more that I wrote the book, the more that we worked on it, the more when we started the arena and started actually leading groups with men who had never done any work on themselves before, as I met more
Yep.
people in the men's work world, I saw that the belief that I had taken on, which is men need to be different, that something's inherently wrong with the way men are showing up in the world,
Mm.
was equally an unhealthy belief.
Right.
And I know people out there that say men need to heal side by side, that they should not heal face to face, that they should just do activities together. And in the past, I would have said that's missing something big.
Hmm.
Now I see it, we need all of it.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. This is an odd segue. And I always say this, but if you looked at my YouTube feed, you'd think that I loved Star Wars, cooking, the manosphere,
Hmm.
videos about religion. Like I'd be this walking and ancient history all at the same time.
Right.
And that's because I try to educate myself on the things that I'm not so aligned with. And I saw
Yep.
this video yesterday, some woman, and she was giving advice to women. And she was saying, okay, how do you keep a man happy? You feed him, you respect him, and you have sex with him. And
Hmm.
then she said, well, how do you keep a woman happy? He has to be a plumber, an electrician, a therapist, a life coach. She went on for like 10 minutes and she was like, women, we have to do it better. Men are so simple. And that is just such a reductionist view of human being.
Right. Right.
Because the more I wrote this book, and yes, it's about men, it's about humans.
Yeah.
That this book is really about redefining what it means to be human and
Yeah.
how do we elevate our intentionality in living so we
Yeah.
don't just roll with our reactions, but
Right.
actually choose how we want to show up. Because it's a
Yes.
load of BS that men are not complicated. And we've
Correct.
seen that. I've seen that working with hundreds of men, how much men crave more than just food, sex, and respect. That and yet at the same time, I know men who say that's all they need because that's the story that society has fed men, that they don't
Hmm.
actually deserve to want more than that.
Right. Right.
And so, well, that's not explicitly in the book. I do believe that the book is about honoring the fullness of our humanity. And that
Right.
goes for men, that goes for women, that it's not one or the other. It's not this binary thing of as a man, I'm very simple and I'm always direct and I only care about these things and I have no access to my emotions. Just like it's not
Right.
true that for women, I would be super emotional
Right.
and not care about sex and want things to look pretty all the time. That people are so much more complex than that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And to cap,
Abs-
I think this is really about redefining, not even redefining, it's just allowing for the fullness of our human expression and the
Yep.
understanding that as humans, we're complex individuals. No two
Yep.
people are the same, and you cannot be reduced down to a stereotype. based on the narratives that have been spun for not even
Right.
thousands of years, the last 100, the last 50 years. So
Absolutely.
that's how I'd answer your question
Hmm.
is is all
I
of
love
that.
it. No, I love that. I remember the first group session 20 plus years ago. And I've shared I believe I've shared in one of our previous episodes that I originally wanted to start the first men's group as a way to heal my relationship with my dad, also change my relationship with how I interacted with men because I often felt uncomfortable. And I remember that first session. Um, there were 8 men in the room, and I remember just the men just sharing, just opening up. And it wasn't even that it was, because it was our first session, first couple of sessions. And I just remember the experience of feeling like I'm home because of what you just shared, which is, oh, we're so much more than just talking about baseball or talking about work or talking about, you said plumber, electrician, right? Some of the things that, you might do, on a weekend, if you're handy or you're trying to, take care of your home, right? Or your apartment. I just remember feeling at home because there was a depth to the conversation. There was a depth to the men. It allowed me to go deeper, right? So our characters are absolutely complicated, both the men and the women. I mean, right? I mean, and what I've also heard you say, or at least allude to, that I just want to call out for everyone, which is, when you said at the very beginning of our conversation here, you said, writing that one character, we won't say who it is yet, but there's one character who definitely goes to a very dark place. And you said, hey, I, I was feeling my dark place, right? And then you were just talking about, the different sides of us as a man, different sides of us as a human. What I want to call out is the importance of accepting and embracing all of us, all parts of ourselves. It's not like you said, this the book is not about you know solving something or doing away with our, let's call it, disempowering or negative traits. It's actually about embracing all of us,
Hmm.
our entire self, our entire experience, our entire humanity. That's really, really important as we grow and heal.
Absolutely. It's one of the reasons why I believe that men's groups are so impactful. And I've worked with hundreds of executives in one-on-one coaching. There's still nothing more impactful than a group that
Yep.
I've seen in the lives of the people we've worked with.
Yep.
And in large part because the way we run our groups and the way the group runs in the book is there is no end. It
Yeah.
just goes on. And so many people, especially here in the States, with this addiction to self-help, this addiction to self-improvement, is that
Hmm.
there is some finish line where you can actually become better
Right.
and you can fix your problems. You can silence the negative narratives. You can shift your behaviors. And one, I think that's so unhealthy to pursue self-development for the sake of reaching a finish line.
Yep.
And second, it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
We're evolving creatures. We
Yeah.
replace one habit with another one. We go through a different part of our life and we change. And
New information gets presented.
new information gets presented that for me, this idea of transformation, it's two things. It's one, which I always go back to one of the men in our group said this when I coached him many years ago. He said, transformation is a trickle. It happens slowly until it happens all at once. But also something that our colleague Brian Helfman says, and Brian runs an amazing program called Third Nature where they do summer camps for adults. And he said that transformation isn't becoming something new. It's becoming more of who you already are.
Ooh, I love
And
that.
I just so appreciate that because I remember when I started doing transformational workshops, there was this whole idea of become unrecognizable, become
Hmm.
someone new. And again, it was this unhealthy paradigm of you've got to race to get to some place that you haven't been
Right,
before.
right, right.
And I believe that our groups are effective. And I believe effective self-development is when you just stick with a group of people or a practitioner to be your accompaniment on your journey.
Yeah, agree.
Because it's staying in that dialogue, it's staying in that curiosity, it's learning along the way where you actually grow the most. It's embracing the journey to Ithaca versus saying, how do I get there the fastest?
Yeah, and that to go back to your question you asked me earlier, that's friendship for me.
Hmm.
Being on this journey together, locked arm in arm, pushing each other, supporting each other, challenging each other, listening to each other, coaching each other, all of it. To me, that is part of the friendship. And you absolutely will get that in the book. Like
Yes.
where the main characters start and and how and where they travel to and all that is I think is a wonderful story.
Yeah. So I know we're almost at our time, but I have one more question. It's a two-parter for you, and we'll see if we
Okay.
can get this in before we have to jump. And we may be doing a part two, three, four, five, six, 10, 20. Again, look again, we said we have
Wait, this is
10
wait, this
years
is
of
turning
content.
this is turning into like writing the book
This is turning
with
into
our
writing the book.
with our
You
different
know,
versions.
we really could have done a podcast for 10 years about writing the book, and then we'd have 300,000 TikTok followers. Anyway, my my two-parter is if a man is hesitant to pick this book up, what would you say to him? And then part two is what might this book help women understand about the men in their lives? Because we really do believe this book is for everybody. It's not just for men and it's not just for women.
Yeah. Um, I actually think, for men, this is a generalization, right? Where men want to do things more solo, if you will. So what I would say to a man is, um, the book is actually a perfect vehicle for that. You can literally do it in private, right? You can read the book or, listen to the audio, right? Um, I would say, because, we often invite folks to our groups as a guest, right? As part of the process, and, if someone wants to consider, I would say to a man, read the book. I would say that, and again, I think it fits well, especially for many men who want to do things more like, hey, I don't need therapy. You know, I mean, guys have a challenge going to the doctor for a physical, right? So forget about therapy, right? I mean, we have a guy in our group who has called his therapist a coach because didn't want to use the word therapist, right? So, um, so I would say to somebody, if you want to better understand yourself, right? Understand yourself, especially as a human. We are all going through many, many different facets of our lives. From finishing school, getting our first job, growing in our career. Getting bigger jobs, more responsibilities, getting married, or being in partnership, or growing a family, et cetera, right? Dealing with elderly parents. I would say to somebody, if you're a human, I would recommend reading this book. To your point earlier, Jake, that you said, this is really a human story, that's really important for everybody to participate in. And so, especially for the men, because men, again, as we get older, our worlds shrink, right? We have less and less closer friends, and so to me, I would say to a man, the book, is these can be your friends. Like
Mm,
these are like your dudes. Without having to, like, go hire a therapist or go join a men's group, or get a business coach or whatever. To me, this is like like a soft landing spot, if you will, right? Because these guys could be your friends.
mm.
Um, The second question was about what might get revealed for women about men.
Yeah, how might this book help women understand, or what might this book help women understand about the men in their lives?
Well, we just touched on it a few minutes ago. I do believe that men um, are complicated, and I say that as just all good. There's more depth to us. Um, I also believe what a woman will hopefully get from the book is that that this process of redefining what it means to be a man is really everybody's work.
Hmm.
It's not just, you and I who identify as men, right? I mean, yes, it's we identify as men, and so that's our opportunity. I also believe that this is really a societal conversation. Like you said, this is a human conversation. Um, we all have created the paradigms that we've all been born into. The paradigms around masculinity, gender identity, you know, what a man is supposed to do, what a man is not supposed to do, right? All of that. We were born into it and we contribute to it, right? And so I would say that what I would want someone who doesn't identify as a man to take away is that there's an opportunity to your point, to honor where men are and how do we recreate paradigms that are outdated or stories, the boy. How about this? The infamous phrase, boys will be boys, right? Which usually has, um, the the implication that something devious is happening, something disrespectful is happening. Um, don't hold men accountable for just being jerks, right? It would be great if we could redefine, boys will be boys in an empowering way also. Not that men or anybody needs to be perfect, and like boys will be boys. It's like I know you know this, but whenever I'm in any of our groups, in the presence of any of our groups, I'm always in awe of these men. We are surrounded by really, really solid men, like really good men. And so I believe there's an opportunity to start spreading the news, So that's what I would want women to take from the book.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, with our final minute, we'll do our parting shots on this first podcast episode on the Men's Group, a novel of messy friendships.
Are you hinting there's going to definitely be a second
There
one?
will
Yeah.
definitely be a second one. And for me, what I would leave all of you who are listening with is first, please read the book. We would appreciate it on a personal level, having put 10 years of our lives and blood, sweat, and tears into this story. And the second thing, I had a good one, and it totally skipped my mind. I think that the second thing is it is to give yourself and everyone permission to be human, which
Mm,
I believe this book is ultimately about, is we're all human. And it's time we stop holding ourselves to this standard of above humanness.
mm,
If we can just allow our humanity to exist and know that that comes with meanness and pettiness and joy and love and generosity and all of that, I think the world can be a different type of place
yes.
versus one where we hold ourselves to an impossible standard.
Yes.
That it's interesting, and I know we've got to run, but in the Greek myths, I've got to work that in some way.
Love it.
The gods are imperfect. They
Yes.
are as petty as humans, if not more so.
Yeah. Because they also yield a lot more power.
Right. And the Greeks almost had something right in that their deities were reflections of themselves.
Mm,
And it probably gave them permission to just be the fullness of a human being. It
yeah.
doesn't mean we can't strive to be respectful and kind and not petty. But
Yep.
do we really need to beat ourselves up when we avoid when we
Yeah.
retract, when we go to the metaphorical cave, because
Yep.
those things are as human as being generous.
Yeah. I love that. My parting shot is a continuation of answering the question that you asked a few moments ago about, what would I say to a man to help prompt them to read the book? Um, what the book reveals is the importance of sharing and opening up. Sharing is actually one of is our second core value of four that we have in our groups. And I really believe this is what I want to leave everyone with is that when we open up and share, right? Now we could share that with a friend, we can share in a group, with a therapist, with a business coach, etc. Right? When we share and we get something out of our heads, that's actually the first step in changing our relationship to that very thing, let's call it, right? That to that situation, to that idea. Um, because otherwise, when it's in our head, it's just in our head, and we're making up all kinds of stories, and those little voices are pumping up the volume, and it's really hard to think. And so, my parting shot is, and this is what I would say to men about reading the book, is that read the book because you really will get the importance of sharing, opening up, getting things out of your head. However, you do it, you don't need a men's group to do it. You don't need a therapist to do that. You don't need a business coach to do that. Um, and it is important to get things out of your head because that is, to me, again, I'll say it again, uh, the probably the most powerful way, certainly the first way in changing your relationship to something. So,
Awesome. Well,
and
thank
read the
you.
book.
Read the book. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see
Yes,
you next time. With love, Jake.
with love, Nick.
With love, men.